Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We're delighted to have you join us for our part two of Dr. Ryan Ross's session with college presidents. And the name of this series is Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. We had a really great session last month. Many of you joined us for that. And we will be recording today's session and we'll be sharing that out later. So if you want to share it with your colleagues, and even students, we've had a lot of great feedback from students who want to be part of this conversation as well. So thank you for joining us. I also want to give a shout out to the PhD project and the KPMG Foundation. Dr. Miles Davis was not able to join us today, but he is one of the people who benefited from the PhD project, and they have done so much to get thousands of people of color, mainly African Americans, into leadership roles within higher education. So you'll hear more about that in future sessions, but we're glad that they're here and that they are one of our sponsors. So Ryan, with that, welcome to everybody, and we're really glad that everybody could join us today.
Thanks, Carol. And again, welcome to everyone. Thank you guys for joining us this month. And if you're returning from last month's conversation, thank you for joining us for part two. Last month, we really focused on kind of the first few months of school, first few months of the semester, a little bit about leadership, a lot about decision making around COVID and some of those kinds of things. And towards the end of the conversation, we really start moving towards a conversation about the experience of being an African American CEO in different roles and some of the lived experiences of our presidents. And we're going to jump right back in that today. But before we do that, I just want to give our presidents an opportunity to introduce themselves again. And we're going to start with Dr. Parker.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Annette Parker, and I'm president at South Central College in South Central Minnesota. And I am in my 8th year as president at South Central College.
Dr. Torrance.
Good afternoon, everyone. Michael Torrance, the 7th-seated president, Mobilization State Community College in Southern Middle Tennessee, serving 11 counties, over 4,500 square miles. Good to be with you today. Looking forward to speaking with you.
Dr. Cright.
Yeah, hey, Dr. Ross. Brent Cright, my 2nd year as the president of Bethune-Cookman University here in Daytona Beach, Florida. Delighted to be back with you all, and always a pleasure to be with Carol Carter. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And again, also, I'll just qualify what Carol said earlier, but Global Minded is just a tremendous organization, and it's been wonderful to be convening the higher education group. And so if you're not on the listserv, go to globalminded.com and join, check out the YouTube link, but just tons of information and tons of highlights on really just amazing people on a daily basis. It's a great way to get to know colleagues around the country. So tap into Global Minded for sure. And again, thank you all for being here. But
and I've just joined.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, it took me a little bit of effort to get into the Zoom. So thank you.
Well, you are right on time, Dr. Gaston. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Dr. Javaune Adams-Gaston. I'm the 7th president of Norfolk State University in Norfolk, Virginia. We're the largest HBCU in the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia.
All right, thank you. So we have our full, we have everyone here. So I'm really excited, and we're going to jump right in with a really basic question, but I think it's a loaded question because sometimes we don't always answer it the way we should. But I just want to ask you guys, how are you? And to follow up with that, when somebody asks you that question, do you answer that question differently based on who asks you?
Well, I'll start with that. So, Dr. Ross, this is what I refer to as a high context environment right now, and we're all guilty of sort of pedantically asking folks how they are, and not really maybe willing to listen to the response. In today's climate, I've thought, as I know my colleagues have, or tried to think much more deeply about the inherent sort of biases in that question, and try to reflect on it from the standpoint of what we're going through. So to your question about how I am, how we are, I'm fine. I'm healthy and blessed and got a great wife and great kids, and I'm the president of a university, and dealing with really difficult decisions and trying to focus on the mental health and my physical health so that I can do the job. But I am fatigued because of the extraordinary challenges of our students and our faculty and staff. And I am fatigued because of the divergences that have been laid bare with the disproportionate impact of COVID, the disproportionate impact of the economic fallout from COVID, from unemployment to benefits to healthcare to comorbidities. So to get to your second question about how I respond, look, when members of the community ask this question, we can delayer it. When others ask it, I'm fine, and hope you all are as well. And so the depth of the question for me really does depend on who's asking, because the fatigue just doesn't allow me to get into to the details with just everyone.
Yeah.
Dr. Ross, I would say that if you ask me how I am, it probably changes as often as our president tweets. So it really depends on the moment. I think that it changes, working from home. I'm working from home now. I'm not on campus that often unless I need to be. And, I was sharing earlier that I've moved my office around. So I'm working here on my desktop today up in my loft, but on other days, I got so tired of sitting here that I started using my laptop and moving around my home. And so it used to be when you come home from work, that's the place that you just kind of chill. You have a glass of wine, you just, deflate, and it seems like I have to be really conscious to to go to my bedroom and just have some time out at certain times. Okay. Because, I'm doing okay, I guess, but, I have family that have challenges. I have family that, went off to the university, and, the community there is blowing up with COVID-19. And so it extends into your family, into your extended family, and those types of things. And so doing okay for the most part, but there's times, and I think that during these crazy times in this election, that you just have to find a way to check out, find that space to get your own health in order, and say, hey, now I'm gonna go chill and find that space. Like, it's my bedroom now because the living room's kind of turned into a workspace. This loft has turned into a workspace, so I'm being very intentional about finding that time and that space for myself. And so I would implore everybody that's listening to us today to do that. When I go out in my community and I'm in a majority community, I tell people I'm okay. I've got a cohort of presidents of color up here now. I'm really fortunate in that we have different kind of conversations to help each other with our health and our support, and we might talk about things a little bit differently there. And so you've got to have that support network as well.
And just to go off of that, I would say that overall, things are going relatively well. I have my health, I have my mental health, and I have, a wonderful spouse, and he is really a partner with this situation. And I have my children and family, and I have a great team here, a great team at NSU. So I'm very, very, very happy to have that, because without that, I probably wouldn't be in as good a shape. All that being said, I think I may have mentioned that I was trained as a psychologist. I was in private practice for about 30 years, and know that there's layer upon layer upon layer that we're all dealing with. And, even though because we are leaders, feel the need and are able to marshal the inner spirit to keep going and to keep driving, there is a cost to all of us. There is a cost because we live in a time where it's unclear sort of what the world is going to morph into. And, we've got COVID, we've got social injustice, we've got racial injustice, we've got a big election coming up, we've got, world partners and world other folks who may not be our partners. And all of that is impacting each of us every day. So I think we talked last time about some things we do to take care of ourselves. I implore all of us to remember to do those things, because I know the hours you guys are all working. I know how much time you're giving to these jobs. I know that, as we live on the campus or we're spending time on campus, we see the students who, for those of us who have students who come to campus, we see those students, we see the difficulty, the pain, the loneliness, the distress, the stress, the anxiety, and we're all trying to temper that and help them through this hard time. But it's also our faculty, it's our staff, our administrators. These are uncertain, unprecedented times, and people are having a lot of pain. And so we're taking on a lot of that. Even if your students are virtual, the struggles that they have. You're very much in touch with that, and you're trying to help them and make sure that they too are all right. So as we take on more and more, we just have to be mindful that we too need to look at the layers of ourselves and make sure that those layers are nourished.
Well, I'm a bubble person, and you got to have the context of what that means. I'm an only kid, and I'm from Richmond, Virginia. So I find solace and great comfort. I'm okay with being by myself. It's just part of it. It's the context in which I've grown up in. And so this has really afforded me personally an opportunity to get better. Because I'll say that prior to this, I didn't take as good a care of myself. I was and still am, really, really focused on making sure the people that I work with and work for, that they're okay. And those are check-ins. Sometimes I'm popping by people's homes and people coming to the front door, to the window. And it's not that they wouldn't come out. It's just I don't want them to come out. I don't want to put them in a situation where I may have been around someone and something may be on my sleeve or on my mask. So I'm conscious of that, that I'm okay. That I'm okay. The concern I have is for my students and all of the employees. So roughly 659 plus employees, adjuncts, full-time, staff members, my maintenance staff in particular, the faculty who keep pivoting. And just because you pivot once doesn't mean that it's over. You keep having to deal with the nuances of an exploding medium, and that's to deliver education in this modality, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, online, face-to-face where it needs to be, and then the perceived guilt that I assume that people may be feeling because they know that there's more that they can give, but when you give anything, the recipient has to be willing to take that. And from that standpoint, that context of the faculty can't get to the students can't get to the faculty in the way that they find the most meaningful. we're doing the best we can, but it is not the most meaningful context in which we'd be able to do our jobs. So I think through that, and we've been thinking about some of the things that Dr. Parker mentioned before. How do we virtually connect? And in some ways that's working. In hindsight, that is the best way that we can do it, to make sure that we get people where we can see them. I know that we have people who live alone. I know that we have people who are taking care of multiple children in a house. And I can't imagine, I have 2 kids and 3 dogs and my wife, and I believe they all take care of me, and it's not the other way around. So that idea of taking care of others, but also needing people to take care of you. And I don't know that we have the balance that we once assumed that we had prior to COVID. So personally, I'm doing well, and professionally, we just keep doing the best we can every day. And I am the eternal optimist.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. How are you? It is such a loaded question, and I'm hopeful that more people are starting to answer that question honestly when they feel like they can. But thinking about that question and thinking about kind of the surface level answers that we have to sometimes give, because we're just focusing on the work and we're focused on making sure other people are okay. There seems to be a sea change in that, though, after George Floyd and the national protests and some of the conversations that have been going on in a lot of circles. There are a lot of Black leaders who are saying, the time is now to start sharing the true narrative, sharing the true trauma that we've experienced, some of the things that we encounter outside of our kind of surface level jobs and surface level work. And, for you guys, do you agree, like, now is the time to kind of start sharing those real lived experiences? And in the past, have you been, which side of that have you been on? Have you been kind of the professional who says, these things happen, this is America, I've got to, figure out how to deal with it and carry on? Or have you been more vocal about what your true lived experience has been as an African-American leader and citizen in America?
Brian, I'm taking to the pen. I'm taking to the pen.
Mm-hmm.
We have written, either myself or members of our staff or our external affairs team. It is time to highlight wherever a person believes that they stand in a climate where people don't feel that I'll go back to balance and connection, because I'm certain that people across the country, and specifically in our state of Tennessee, may feel disconnected in ways that we can't explain, or that we can't make a clear delineation of where do I step next in a safe space. And arguably, I'm a light-skinned African-American male that has achieved, fortunately, and I sit in this seat. So I understand the context of what that means, the paper bag test and all those kinds of things. So, that's a real thing to me. I'm from the South. So how do I leverage what I know for the context of who I have to engage with for the success of all the people that I serve? Now, I've lost a lot of weight because I've been walking, but that's heavy. And to be considerate of making sure that the connections that are necessary made across all the socioeconomic statuses in the kaleidoscope of color of people that I serve, that no one feels as if they're being left out of the conversation, creating spaces for those who may have felt they didn't have a voice. Here's a seat to the table. Here's a megaphone. Here's a microphone. Here's a pen and piece of paper. Here's a coloring book, whatever it may take for people to engage in our democratic process. With all of the things going on, arguably, we can talk about where we are as a society, still the best country on the planet. However, there are points of emphasis that my grandmother and mother and my grandfather always said, well, when you get older, you won't have to deal with that. That's what we hope for you. Well, there's still things that we must address. And it's Some of the things have to do with some, and I'll just give two and move on. One of them is the institutional biases that are pervasive across a loaded question like, how are you? Versus, you're very articulate. What does that mean? Like, I went to school for 15 years. Of course, I'll be able to put a sentence together. So this context of who we are as individuals and what we must evolve into as a nation, if we don't continue the dialogue, then shame on us. And shame on us for not setting the stage and the table for our children and grandchildren.
Thank you.
I always say to people, the one thing that my parents knew when my mom was pregnant with me was that they would have a Black child. And my perspective has always been as a Black female, and I can't be someone else. And so I have always raised my voice from my perspective, which is, I know that doors are often attempted to be closed, so I need to push them open, and I'm not afraid to do that. I know that there are many folks who would like to see you. I've worked for a long time in predominantly white institutions, and I had lots of opportunity to do things that were pretty amazing, but I was often the first one or the only one. But for me, what matters is if I don't raise my voice, who will? And I can't lead young people to use their education as a transformative experience that allows them to do what they need to do if I'm not willing to raise my voice and say what is wrong, and we need to right those wrongs. And there's no better time than now, because we have the attention. I mean, for all the terrible things about COVID, the ability for it to raise to the public view the inequities that are systemic inequities. We now have to talk about those things. We can't just say, oh, well, it's that way, it's always been that way. And I've never been that person, so I really don't know how to do that. What I have been raised to do by my parents and my family and my grandparents is to raise your voice when you have the seat of people being able to listen to you. Then you have to raise your voice. And what is happening out here in our streets is deplorable and difficult and painful. And it is something that we just can't keep using those words for. We've got to do something different. We've got to demand a different way of going forward as a nation. This is a nation of people, not a nation with some people who matter and others who don't.
I would just add to that I came such a non-traditional path to the presidency. I started in manufacturing. I cut my teeth in the auto industry, and just being in manufacturing and in the auto industry, I was always, the only, in many cases, the only female, the only African American, and the only African American female. And, you work twice as hard to prove yourself, right? I used to go out and do customized training, and I go into a corporate boardroom with laptops as I taught computer-aided drafting. And, they would, all the guys would underestimate me, all the engineers I'd be training, right? And I love it because by first break, my little joke was they all followed me to the coffee, wanting more information. And so you're constantly proving yourself, and then you make your way all the way up to the presidency. And when I came into South Central College, it was very few minorities, yet a large population of minority students, a large population of Somali students. And they would just look at me and smile. And and they felt like when they had a grievance that I would listen, right? and you know, and it took a while in how you have to navigate to diversify your institution so that the faculty and staff start looking more like the students, and that's a task within itself. We could spend a whole session on that, right? But after these recent incidents, you know, I was compelled to say something to, you know, our students, our employees were expecting for me to say something. You have to be careful how you say it, but you need to say something and let them know that you're there to support them. I know that my students were up in Minneapolis protesting. I've got DACA students that I know have been protesting, and it's up to us to let them know that they are that their grievances are real, and we all need to understand them. You know, we've been working as an Achieving a Dream school to really uh, to focus on equity and through a culture of evidence, and it you have to challenge people about things being equal, and I treat everybody the same, and those types of things. And it's up to us to change the culture in our institutions to understand that's not real and that's not right, and we have to do something about it. And so, you know, now that where I'm at in my tenure here, I feel like I need to make a difference by putting some tools in the toolbox that go beyond my tenure as a president, and that is really embedding those things that are going to make a difference in the lives of our students into this institution.
Ryan, I don't think there's much I can add to that, but I would say to your question, so I've always spoken out, right? Because it's just part of the DNA. But I am especially privileged to be here now, where the platform is different. And so as with my colleague, Dr. Adams-Gaston, I mean, I think we're both from the Big Ten. She was at Ohio State. I was at the University of Michigan for 12 years. And most recently, you know, a university in Denver, University of Denver, literally on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so I spoke out there, but it was exhausting and tiresome, which is why I'm here. And so for me, I've appreciated the opportunity to harness the megaphone that has been put on our laps as a result of the environment we live in. And so for me, you know, among other things, so I sit on a couple of corporate boards, right? Large, white, conservative. They are what they are. And we had unimaginably in one of our board meetings, we had a 3-hour meeting on equity and diversity and race, which for this company, now after saying that, I won't name the company, but it's very large, would have been unheard of, unthinkable, unimaginable. But we had the CEO, we had the chairman, we had the vice, a whole board. That is powerful. So I'm a former dean of business schools. Shout out to the PhD project folks out there. And so our base, if you will, is, you know, it's the business community. It's a business community here in this small southern white town. And so the ability to have these unambiguously definitive conversations now is frankly deeply refreshing for me. There's also frustration because, I mean, it is the South and, you know, they are who they are. But so I've appreciated that and tried to take full advantage of it. Like Dr. Adams-Gaston, we have had students on campus since August. We had students on campus because we serve students who needed to be on this campus. I mean, like literally, who have no place else that's safe, and that's part of what HBCUs do. And so the other thing that has been revealed for me has been the need for and our penchant for compassion and empathy and a recognition of what these times call us to be. And so again, Ryan, this has been a horrible, devastating, unprecedented pandemic, but it is my hope that through the discourse and dialogue and the learning, that we will strengthen the better angels among us, and that maybe come out, maybe, I don't know, I don't let myself go down too far this road, come out better for it. But it has certainly defined who we are and how we interact and what we believe our obligation is to our community and to our students, and for me, to this business community. So in that sense, I've tried to take full advantage of the opportunities.
Thank you. And a couple of you guys have alluded to it, right? Being the only, whether it was the only African-American or the only woman or you know, the only professor, but there have been times in your careers where you've been the only. And I'm just curious if you'd be willing to share a little bit about that. You know, how did being the only impact you positively, negatively? You know, what has it done for the way you interact with students in higher ed? And ultimately, what impact did it have on you landing in your current CEO seat?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I
it
was
started
really-
off.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I was raised, my parents put me in the only experiences a lot. I had the fortunate experience of growing up in Washington, D.C. I was born and raised there, as were my parents. And I went to public school in Washington, D.C. Through the 6th grade, and had wonderful, wonderful education and teachers, et cetera. And then I went to private school, and I was the only one in my, only Black kid in my class. And then I went to high school, and there were 400 students, all females. And of the 400, there were 40 Black females. That was it. And I went to summer camps where I was the only Black individual. So I learned very early how to navigate the only, but I came from a deep tradition of knowing that I mattered. And I think that was the experience I had growing up with Black teachers telling me, you can do this, you are smart, you are capable, you're able. Come from a long line of teachers, so they always gave me the confidence to know that I could be competitive with anyone. But that doesn't make it easy, because a number of jobs that I've had have been the first, the only. As I said, I was in athletics, in intercollegiate athletics as assistant athletic director. I was the first African-American female assistant athletic director at the University of Maryland College Park. And that position, the person who preceded me was an African-American male. He preceded me by a year. And you know, I know we forget that Maryland is the South, but it is. And so a lot of difficulty with people, especially moving into intercollegiate athletics at Division I level, where that's, you know, the purview of certain people, or has been in the past. So that experience, and going into my experience at Ohio State, and being the first African-American female to hold the role that I had as senior vice president. And, you know, it just has gone on and on. And what I will say is, while I recognize that there are certain fights or battles that I have to make sure I have to take on, I'm not surprised, because this has been my experience for a lot of my life. So I know how to do it. And what I have been able to do is use that experience as I have come, what I really consider coming home to an HBCU, because it is really reminiscent of the structure, the kind of support, the kind of pouring into that I got very early on. So I feel privileged to come back to use all the things that I have learned, and very much like Dr. Cricht, to say, you know what, what's important is these students and the opportunities that they're going to get. And this whole community needs to support that. We have businesses and we have corporations and others who need to support that. And I'm not afraid to go out and say, that's what we need to do, because I've had that experience and I've been in those environments. So for me, this is a series of firsts, but the firsts have helped me to be able to use that to say, I know that what we do is important, and I know that these students are important, and I need your help. And yeah, I know you can give it to me because I've seen it. I know what's there.
Dr. Cricht, I want to jump over to you with this. Just, obviously your latest post being at the University of Denver and some of the corporate boards and just some of your other comments. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, look, I'm used to it. I mean, I was raised in Detroit by my mom, went up through Detroit public schools. I don't think I had the kind of education Adams-Gaston had, regretfully. And I owe one of the nation's premier land grant institutions, Michigan State, everything, because they quite literally saved my life. Look, when I was at the University of Michigan at the business school, I led the school's premier outreach and research institute, the William Davidson Institute, which focused on post-central command and emerging market economies. And so we were doing stuff all over the world. And I was, in my early 30s, and that was pretty heady. And I had the benefit of some mentors and some folks who believed in me. Sometimes I think saw more in myself than I did. And those experiences, whether it was at Michigan or Arizona or the University of Denver, were vital in my own development. And so Ryan, what they have allowed me to do is to recognize that whether it's my board work, international work, or this, one, honestly, I'm just at the stage in my life where I don't have to tolerate anything from anyone. And I wasn't at that stage 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years, but I've appreciated this journey because I can be discerning in terms of what I put up with and what I deal with. And for me, and I want to say something about HBCUs, which I've fallen in love with. And for the record, we consciously sent 2 of our kids to HBCUs, so we do believe in them. But part of the challenge with HBCUs is that they can be so comfortable for our community and so insular and provincial that we think they represent an institutional or global standard, and they do not. And so I don't know about Dr. Adams-Gaston, I have appreciated coming into this institution being not of it, right? Not sure if everybody agrees with that, but that's my view. And
I appreciate that.
And so I think that my experience in these primarily white institutions and on these boards has forced me to sort of, compete intellectually and otherwise. And I have deeply appreciated that. For me, it's been a great journey. And so this is just an immense blessing at the stage of my life to be here and to pour my energy and commitment into this institution, this legacy, these students, and that's how I look at it.
I couldn't agree more, Dr. Cricht.
That's totally awesome. So Ryan, my first, I would say, and Dr. Chait, we have something in common. I was born in Jackson, Michigan, and was in the first grade, I was one of 3 kids that was desegregated, the first of the 3 kids that were bused in Jackson County.
Wow.
And that was tough.
No doubt.
By the time we were in middle school in Jackson, and people don't think of the North like this, but we were on Walter Cronkite every night because we had the National Guard in our halls at the high schools, at the middle schools, and at the elementary schools. And so, you know, I was, you know, I'm old enough to remember Dr. King. I was a kid, but my mother used to sit us down at night and we'd listen to him on the radio, and that was the peace in my life, and it kept me balanced about what I needed to do. And so, you know, I've been in a situation now. I'm a little envious of you two at the HBCUs, because I've always been, you know, kind of that one, especially, you know, being in manufacturing, and you know, I've just always been that one. What I think that does do, though, is in this majority environment, it does help me to help my students understand how to navigate it, and to understand some of the challenges. But it does get tiring. I mean, it gets tiring. I'm working on I'm co-chairing a symposium for the National Academies right now on how the work of the future relative to STEM education, and we're doing some research right now in the history of education, and I wanted them to specifically focus on the diversity in education, and the challenges we've had from the Moral Act to the GI Bill, and how it has impacted negatively minorities. And it's you know, but I can, as the co-chair of that, say, hey, we really need to dig into this if we're going to figure out or at least propose what needs to happen in the future. But I do think that, you know, it's just another one of those challenges that we dealt with in the 60s and beyond and before that. And it's just this long arc. And so will we improve a few things? Probably. Will there still be challenges? Absolutely. But we need to keep working to create a more equitable environment for our students.
Dr. Torrance, do you have anything to add here?
Oh, of course. You know, the 3 folks who've spoken before me, I get to stand on their shoulders. They've incurred and experienced things that I directly and have indirectly learned from, either by asking questions or simply observation. And that is something that you learn navigating this sphere of higher education as an African-American leader, that your observation skills need to be just as sharp as the other skills that you're going to be assessed on. So in Tennessee, I'm the only African-American male president in our 13 member community college system. And although not the only African-American leader, but who do I talk to when I'm speaking about things from the perspective of a Black man in the South, navigating as well as leading? And so when I have this conversation, it's more so about listening and learning while I'm leading versus trying to take steps before I understand the proper planning, because I recognize that culture will always eat strategy every day of the week. So as strategical and tactical as I believe that I am in terms of building teams and building tools to help institutions be successful, navigating that in a space, it has to, from my perspective, be shown as a common space versus a non-diversified space. And so there's the dichotomy, right, Ryan? Being able to balance what you know that you are a part of, but not asking for a seat at the table, demanding a seat at the table, And when you cannot have a seat at the table, I simply say, let's build our own table. So that's from my vantage point, and allowing what we do to speak for itself, not seeking someone for an attaboy or a pat on the back, handle what needs to be handled, and make that success salient for all people who are involved.
Thank you. In follow up to that, there are a lot of professionals who are online watching today, and they haven't had the fortunate or unfortunate experience of always being exposed to these kinds of things, and so find themselves all of a sudden in a situation where they are the only when they haven't been, or they find themselves in a situation where there's a feeling that maybe they're in a situation where they have an opportunity, but if they don't excel at it, it may mess it up for those who are going to follow. Let's consider this a flash round because there's a couple other things we need to get to before our time at 3. But in 60 seconds or less, what advice from your wealth of experience would you give to folks who find themselves in the space of only and they've got to navigate it successfully and quickly?
So I'll be quick on this. One thing that I could always control, Ryan, is I never, ever allowed anyone to outwork me. And so I come to all meetings over-prepared. I think critically about things before I need to respond to them. I test, if I have doubt, my answers or perspective with colleagues and mentors. And I never said no to an opportunity. And so those are some things that work for me. But the work ethic thing, just work harder, because you can control that. And so that was just one of the things that I still hold on to that. I can let go of that a bit now, but that was a major driver for me.
Mine is to be first. The competitive advantage about showing up before anyone else, and I'm the one that turns the lights off too sometimes, most of the time. So get there before everybody, get action oriented before people get to the coffee and to the water cooler talk, and business is ready to be handled. Now, pretty much I have things knocked out by 10 a.m. most days. The rest is just filibuster based on reading and over preparation. So the same thing that Brent has mentioned. I'm not going to be outworked. I'm not going to be outdone. And I'm going to know more about what people aren't going to take legs into a conversation, because the conversation is never just a conversation. It's a lot more depth to it. And the better prepared you are to move in different directions, the better off you will be and the better your institution will be.
I always say, take every opportunity and be in the room. And when the opportunity doesn't exist, be in the room. And if you're in the room, you have an obligation to use your voice. You can't sit by quietly and let things happen. You have to think critically about the issues at hand. I agree, preparation means everything, but I think you raising your voice and using your voice when you are in the room and ensuring, I mean, sometimes you got to use a little bit of sharp elbows to be in the room, but that's okay because your perspective matters. I know mine matters.
Mm-hmm. For me, Ryan, I think of a couple of things. One of my former bosses that I learned a lot from, and a lot I learned I wanted to keep. Other pieces, I said I'll never do that. But one thing he taught me is to ask, to ask 10 people because you'll get one yes. And so I've always really started out that way. And then where I'm at right now is building my team and making sure I'm really impressed with my cabinet right now, and really building teams so that we can lead. I'm very competitive. When they say we plan to do or we want to do, I say we will do. And so I've changed that conversation just by changing, a few words. You've got to always work towards that goal and not say we plan to do or we want to do. We will do and work towards it.
Thank you. And you bring up a great point, building teams. And I know many of us who are online and you as well have been in conversations where the conversation about how do we attract, retain, and attract, retain, and retain professionals of color. So we have people on our campuses that actually identify with and look like our students. What are your thoughts on how we get that done in higher education so that it actually happens and becomes more than this conversation that seems like we keep missing the mark on?
Well, I've got a couple of battle scars because of that. But it's been great, and I want to share that I came in and I was talking earlier before we started. I think there were 3 African Americans at South Central College. Now my cabinet is ironically is probably 80% female and 50% people of color, actually African American. And they're sharp. I mean, they're sharp people. And I think that you really have to network. You have to have a track record of success that you can sell them on. But then when you get them to consider your institution, especially when you're somewhere like where I'm at, you have to make sure that you're wrapping the community around them, the other minorities in the community, make sure that they're connected to them. They know where they can go to church. They know where they can get their hair done. They know where they can have the kind of entertainment that they want culturally. And so we've worked hard at that. I'll make sure that they're connected to that community, and also that especially those that report directly to me, that I'm providing them with the kind of support and leadership to advance their career. So my vice president of student and academic affairs right now, she's going to be a president. It's not going to be long. And I supported her getting into the Aspen Institute. She's an Aspen fellow right now. And not everybody would take their VP that they really need and invest in them that way. But I see her future, and I want to make sure that she gets there. So I also see myself as her mentor, one of her mentors, in how she gets there, and her
Great.
success is mine, and I do that with my entire cabinet.
Thank you. Others have thoughts on this one? How do we attract, attain, and retain professionals of color in higher education institutions?
I think that the way Dr. Parker talks about it is really important, that you hire the best people and then you support them and you encourage that they get the opportunities to be on the stage so that they get other opportunities. And my experience has been always mentoring people forward and having them feel good about being able to do the next thing. They don't have to stay with me forever, but they have to be ready to go to the next thing. And I've had a lot of people that have just done very, very well because we together talked about, what do you want to do next? If you want to do that, how are we going to get there?
Right. Seeing other thoughts on that, I do really quickly want to just kind of end on this thought about what do we have to do in higher education to get serious about equity and the equity gaps that we're seeing in higher education. With COVID, now we're seeing the gaps even more pronounced. And so what do we have to do to actually get to a place where we're closing the gaps in a way that makes sense and continuing to grow the success of our students?
Ryan, I'll start. I mentioned earlier that we're an Achieving the Dream school, and that means we're focused on disaggregating our data, and really focusing on equity and a culture of evidence. And we've really changed a lot of processes and things that are excelling in that work. So one of the things I did this this summer is I worked with our faculty to change our program health metrics. Okay, so there's certain things within the state of Minnesota. Once Minnesota state system gets their appropriation from the state legislature, that then there's metrics for what South Central College will get for our allocation. Some of that's based on FTEs or FYEs, but other things are based on the achievement gap, student success, retention, completion, etc. Well, guess what? Why would I measure everything? And everything that I'm being measured on wouldn't go down into the program level. So every program has an achievement gap, and we're looking at it. We've disaggregated that data, and we're looking at it at the course level. Okay, so when I look at program health, are you closing the achievement gap? Are you closing it at the course level? Are you closing it at the program level? And everybody's held accountable for that. Because for me, I think that faculty pay attention to the things that keep their program running. And that's important. And in this time when the state has a deficit, so I think 2022, fiscal year 22 is going to be a little tough. I'm showing them how we can increase our allocation by closing the achievement gap and creating more student success. And if you're wondering where students are coming from, Student Affairs is trying to bring in more students. How about we retain the students we already have, make their life a little easier, right?
So
And
Dr. Parker,
them money from the state of Minnesota.
All right, sorry, I'm gonna stop you right there. We got a few minutes left and I want to try to get everybody in on this one, and this will be the final question. Dr. Gaston?
I believe you have to have outcomes that you have baked into the strategic plan and the work that you're trying to do. And so you've got to have outcome measures, and then you have to hold yourself accountable to those outcome measures. So we're working very hard to do things like close the achievement gap, really thinking about not only enrollment, but retention and graduation, because I think it is a real problem that we have had across all institutions, with a few exceptions, that we bring students in, especially students of color, and they leave without a degree in hand. And they really, really need that degree in hand in order for them to be successful. So I'm really thinking about ensuring that we have outcome measures that are connected to our strategic initiatives so that we can hold ourselves accountable to primarily our students, our faculty, and our community.
Dr. Craig?
Yeah, real briefly, Ryan. Look, my view is that we've got these 19th century business models trying to prepare students for a 21st century marketplace, right? And I would say that the answer to your question is really contextual. It's situational. I mean, the answer for University of Michigan is going to be different from a University of Denver or Bethune-Cookman. And I think part of the problem is whether it's funding, apparatus, business model, academic structure, you know, there's one standard that we believe fits all, and that's just kind of nonsensical. For a place like Bethune-Cookman University, we have an obligation to challenge the orthodoxies that have defined this institution. Moreover, we have to recognize that for the students we serve, the future of the marketplace in which they're going to be entering, no matter what they study, is at this convergence of physical and digital technologies. And so that there are fluencies and experiences that they need. And so what does that mean for us? We have to have those kind of conversations to fundamentally reimagine what it is we do. And that's the fun part. So as soon as this COVID stuff ends, that's what we'll be focused on.
Yeah. And Dr. Torrance, I hate to do this to you, but 30 seconds, you got a final thought on this?
The vertical integration of technology to improve the human condition is what the purpose of all our institutions are, whether we recognize it or not. The evolving marketplace that's focused on digitization and acumen begins and ends today with the ability to utilize these 21st century skills that are associative with being able to code and think beyond what's emergent today that's actually actual. So there's my 30 seconds.
Man, that was, whew. That was a mission statement, a goal statement, all in one. I just want to say, we've hit our time, and again, I appreciate you guys so much. I could do this all day. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here, to share some insight, to push this higher education series on, to support Global Minded, and most importantly, to pour back into the professionals who admire you and see where you're standing and hope to be there one day. So I salute you all. I just want to say thank you so much, and look forward to continuing conversation with you guys in multiple capacities. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, Carol, I want to turn it back over to Global Minded.
Thank you, Ryan, and thanks to all of you. And this is why our first gen and students that we serve love to get to know you all, because you are their role models and you are people that they can relate to. And this is why we want to really broadly share sessions like this with students. And I want to invite all of you on November the 9th. Our next equity panel is with our health leadership team, and it's led by Dr. Monique Butler, Dr. Pierre Theodore, who's at Johnson & Johnson, but Monique Butler is an amazing African-American leader, and she's also part Cherokee, and she got promoted to a major job. She'll be moving to Florida, Brent, from Denver, and she has a lot of deep roots in Detroit. So I'm excited for you guys to get to know each other. And she has a quite remarkable panel in the month of November. We're going to be really looking at issues around veterans, our Native American leaders, and some of the rural issues. So those will be some of the topics in the newsletters happening in November. But we want to also just say one more thing, that we're recognizing a lot of our ability status leaders for the next few days for the rest of October. It's National Disability Employment Month. So I hope that we can be honoring those incredible people among us as well. So thanks to all of you. It's just great to be with you all, and we hope that we'll be seeing you all live next year. But I know that Ryan will be having you all involved in some other groups in the months to come, and we will be here with Ryan's session on the 24th of November. And we'll get you details on that. And we did record this session. So for all of you who signed up, we'll be including the link and a couple of other articles or other things that are germane to the things that were discussed today. Thanks again so much.
Thanks, Dr. Ross. Carol, good to see you all. Appreciate you.
Great to see you guys. Hang in there and take good care.
Be safe, y'all. I'll talk to y'all soon.
Great. Be safe, everyone. And thank you again. Talk to you soon.